The Himalayan Water Project has put together a cluster of GEHW courses in collaboration with the Office of Global Education that revolve around the subject area of geopolitics and ecology of Himalayan water. The classes are The Media, Climate, and Other Calamities by Kunda Dixit, and The Himalayas, Geopolitics and Ecology of Melting Mountains by Sophia Kalantzakos. The courses will lead students on a deep dive into three crucial themes: climate change and geopolitics, environment, and the media's interpretation of the Himalayan climate crisis. Students will also be traveling to Nepal on a regional trip, which coincides with a conference that brings together scholars, practitioners, and policymakers to engage students on emerging challenges and solutions in the Himalayan region. Kunda and Sophia, along with Carol Brandt, Associate Vice Chancellor for Global Education and Outreach, join us in today's webinar to discuss the Himalayan Water Project and the ideation and creation of the GEHW cluster. Thank you all for being here. I'd like to start with a very open-ended question. Why do the Himalayas matter? And what led you both to start the initiative? Kunda, Sophia, who would like to go first?
Sophia, you go first.
Well, why do the Himalayas matter? Because the melting mountains are a reality. And this affects the water for more than 2.5 billion people. And I can't imagine what can be more urgent than that. But I will say that Kunda and I have worked together for many years. And it was really during COVID that we were having a Zoom conversation and talked about all of the things that people were not talking about because we were all so focused on COVID. And, Kunda has tremendous experience in the situation in the Himalayas, the conditions, and he was saying how things were getting progressively worse. So we sat with some former students of ours having this conversation and decided that we would like to put together an initiative that would spotlight this incredible urgent problem that was being, I would think, underrepresented. We were not paying as much attention as we should. Kunda?
Yeah, as a boy growing up in Kathmandu, I've seen these mountains. I've been watching the mountains and they've been melting in front of my eyes. Glaciers that used to be there 20, 25 years ago even are not there anymore. The snow line has been receding. And when we've been hiking up in the mountains, you can see the changes in front of your eyes. And this is the visible change, but there's lots of other stuff that's happening in the mountains. And as Sophia said, it's not just affecting Nepal, it affects everything downstream. And this is the roof of the world. This is the water tower of Asia. This is where there's the largest repository of stored water outside of the polar regions. And if these glaciers melt, it's going to affect 1.2 billion people living in China, India, and the rest of Asia. So that's why it's important. The other reason it's important is because to find solutions to this would need cooperation. But the countries in the region bordering the Himalaya or where the Himalayas are not very friendly to each other. And that is stopping cooperation. And therefore, this is where the media comes in, is that we have to try to find a way to make us all work together to find solutions to this global crisis that's affecting the mountains.
Can I add just one more thing about this? Because I definitely think that, Kunda touched upon this because there's so many nations that are affected by the melting mountains and the access to water. And nation states tend to territorialize everything, but this is really part of the global commons. We can't territorialize, I guess we can if we want to, but the idea is that this is something that is not for one nation alone. And part of what we're seeing are increasing actions that seek to control the weather, the water, the damming of the rivers. And this is a huge crisis. And from a geopolitical perspective, with all the attention, global attention now on the Russian invasion of the Ukraine, imagine this is such a huge issue that could threaten the stability of all of these countries in Asia in a way that's unprecedented. This is a true geopolitical problem. And in some ways, it's an egregious policy failure that it has been so deprioritized in the, let's say, international relations conversation.
Thanks to both of you. Kunda, as I was hearing you speak about the melting mountains in your lifetime, it occurred to me that probably the mountains have been there for the entire history of humanity. And we're facing the first time in which humanity may face a future without the mountains remotely like they were for most of our evolutionary history. And both of you have really highlighted the challenges to confronting this dilemma, which has to do with the obstacles to collaboration across what appear to be divided interests rather than planetary interests. And, you know, in a way, it almost seems to be the kind of problem that NYU Abu Dhabi is prepared to put its students out to address. We have students in the classroom here from every one of the countries that the Himalayas water. I'm not sure how many universities have both that and students from all other countries that have a different kind of historical relationship to the Himalaya. Carol, could you talk a little bit about the Global Ed program and how it, at least as I understand it, I'm sure you can say this much more broadly than I can, how it takes students into these problems, introduces them to them in new ways and challenges them to find new ways of learning about them first and then new ways of approaching them after they leave the classroom.
Yes, thanks. We are talking about networks here and ecologies, and we have one for education as well. NYU, a number of years ago, began to imagine a global network where faculty, students, curriculum, research could circulate among what is now 3 portal campuses, one in New York, one in Shanghai, and one in Abu Dhabi, and 12 other sites around the world where we have facilities and faculty from Paris to Rome to Sydney to Ghana. And at NYU Abu Dhabi in specific, global education and global diversity was hardwired both into our curriculum and into our student body. We have students from over 120 countries. Over 80% are not from the UAE. When they first come to the UAE, they are coming for a 4-year study abroad right here and need to get to know this place, want to get to know this place. As part of the curriculum, they have core courses that are very much focused on very significant, hard to answer questions in the world. What is war? What is climate change? And they are asked to pursue those from different cultural perspectives, different disciplinary perspectives. They spend, of course, the bulk of their time here in Abu Dhabi, but our curriculum also provides them with the chance to spend a semester or 2 away within this global network. That gives them the chance to see firsthand and study firsthand how the countries from Paris, as I said, or France to Ghana are addressing climate change, are developing climate action plans, among other things. They also, and now specific to the courses that Sophia and Kunda are teaching, have the great opportunity to spend time in countries in the region here. So all of our students take 3, what we call J-term courses, intensive 3-week courses every year. They take them one at a time. The courses are very much planned by the faculty to take advantage of the text of the real world of the place where the courses are held. So that could be Djibouti, it could be Eritrea, Sri Lanka, Malta, Greece, and in this case, Nepal. So during the 3 weeks of J-term, the courses will spend about a week in Nepal talking with those experts in Nepal who've been grappling with this for years, hearing firsthand from a variety of knowers, a variety of experts, challenging that which they have learned in the classroom by engaging both the people, the landscapes, the challenges directly during these J-term classes.
And they are challenging classes. I know I've taught two in Shanghai. They're exhausting for the students and they're exhausting for the professor, but they've been two of the most rewarding times I've had in and out of the classroom, moving my students around the city. But the question here, back to Kunda and Sophia, is what's the plan? Why go to Nepal? What are you going to do there? And how do your own relationships to the place and the question shape what you plan to do with your students there?
I think I'm very lucky among the J-term professors because I get to take students to my own country, places I'm familiar with. In fact, a lot of the field trips, the walkabouts will be in the neighborhood where I was born. There's an immediacy to it. There's an intimacy to what we're talking about. And I think, what we'll be doing for the first 2 weeks is learning about the theory behind what's happening. We have readings on climate change, about the media's response to climate and other calamities. And then to be able to see it firsthand and to walk among the mountains in the forests and looking at what this is doing and talking to experts and experts showing us how climate crisis is affecting biodiversity, water resources, springs going dry, droughts, floods, and then I think it will just leave an indelible print in the students' minds. And this is going to be a multidisciplinary course. So there'll be all kinds of experts, not just climate experts. There'll be anthropologists, there'll be geographers, there'll even be poets and artists talking about how to communicate this science to a larger public. So media's interface with this crisis and the other crises that come out of it, like food security and other kinds of disasters, I think that's where we'll be focusing in Nepal. And during the trip, we're also going to have, with Sophia's class, a conference on Himalayan ecology and geopolitics. So that's a one-day conference where everything will just come into focus again.
I'd just like to tell a personal story. So I remember when I took a class, I think it was the first time, it was 2015, I took a class to Nepal. And we had just come back and then invited Kunda to come talk to us about whatever he wanted to talk about. And he spoke about the climate crisis. And he presented to what we thought was a shocking reality, that all these hundreds of unnamed lakes had formed because the mountains had been melting. And he said, almost prophetically, that this is a tremendous problem because these lakes are very unstable and we're in an area that's very prone to very intense earthquakes. And that an earthquake of the magnitude that we usually experience in Nepal, and we're due for one, could really destroy, break up these lakes, and the water would come down as a tsunami and really erase, half the country and all the way into India. So I'm saying this sort of in my own words, but it was a very shocking reality. And of course, the earthquake did happen. Just a few, I would say maybe even like a week or two later after this talk. And the first thing that our class was talking about before we even understood the extent of what had happened is we went to look to see if any of these lakes had burst. So I mean, this is something also that is of huge concern, because and this is where science also comes in, because this is a multidisciplinary problem. The sciences play an important role, the livelihoods of the people play an important role, culture plays an important role. And these things are all going to be woven into the curriculum and into the classes that we'll teach. And to say one more thing, and this is why I absolutely love working with Kunda, is that we're both kind of creative too. So we've added layers. We will have the students become artists. They will be painting the mountains. We will have a photographer guiding us to visually reflect on what we see. So there's no one way to understand and learn anymore. We don't only learn from textbooks. And we've been very fortunate because there are not that many universities in the world that allow us to have this kind of experience. And I think that we're also very lucky to have Carol, who sees beyond what's in front of us, and has always been very encouraging for us to go to the next level.
Yeah, Sophia, you're really right in that last note, both of you, about many things, but that last note makes me think that when I was growing up, study away meant going to a country to learn the language that's spoken there. And that was the only model that I knew existed. And it made sense as a good model. It made great sense as a model. But there are other models. And here we have one where we can take students, in a sense, to become literate and conversant with new vocabulary and new communication skills in a problem, right? Rather than a language, right? And that's a whole other way of acquiring these skills. And what I find so compelling about these two is how different they are. And I think about the opportunities that the students may have to interact with one another while we're there and to talk about the two classes. I know that when I taught in Shanghai, some of the best moments were when we happened to meet up another class and the students would share what they were learning from one class to the other. But I'm not sure that this has ever been conceptualized explicitly this way as a cluster before, Carol. Maybe it has, and if it has, please tell us how that came about and what you see happening here with clustering these experiences rather than one-off trips for students who end up being there by themselves in a way in a group rather than among lots of other students taking the same thing.
I think we've been moving toward clusters for quite some time, but we formalized it a little bit more. But before I go there, I just want to comment on something you just said. We are trying to develop a different type of literacy, not the literacy of reading a printed text or a film, or even as our colleagues in the arts do with real art objects, but the literacy of reading a dynamic text, an ever-changing landscape, and bringing the tool of emotion to that. I think a lot of what happens when we bring students outside of their familiar is that they have a heightened sense of awareness, every sense of smell, touch, everything imaginable, just makes everything much more vibrant, and somehow that facilitates a different way of knowing. As I work with the deans and with faculty on exploring possibilities for core courses, I apply a poetic imagination. I love poetry, and just see immediately where there are interesting correspondences between courses. That allows students then, if those two faculty members are interested in one another's related subjects, to have a more interdisciplinary exploration of the topic overall. Each class can go deeply into its particular focus, but there can be joint sessions, joint lectures, and that happens readily already on our campus in Abu Dhabi. But to actually have the 2 or 3 classes planned together to be in a different location and have the possibility then of connecting with experts in the host location, so that there's greater reciprocity. Our students are not just taking from the place, they are helping to generate knowledge in that place with people that they ordinarily wouldn't be in conversation with. So the fact that the two classes culminate in a workshop, I think, is an innovation that we've come up with. We are experimenting with clusters in other areas in this J term as well. One will be around disability studies. We have 3 classes that are focused on different aspects of working with people of determination. And we have another cluster around diversity and tolerance that is looking at those things from a political science, a biological, a psychological, a religious, and a linguistic perspective. They will have a joint workshop on campus all together. So beyond the benefit for our students, I think the faculty have a great chance to learn from one another, think about that next edited volume that they might produce. And we have the chance to give back to the societies that are hosting us and think about NYU Abu Dhabi and societal impact overall in the tiny little microcosm of the 3 weeks of J-term.
So I just want to jump in and say that because there's also this initiative, what we feel is that this is an ongoing development of a pedagogy. It also introduces students, because I guess we may even talk about this in a little while, because we have a lot of students working with us. We have students who have left NYU Abu Dhabi who are still willing to contribute. So we are creating these living and enduring networks of people who've, contributed, put their little stone, their little pebble in this, in the creation of this initiative, focusing on the melting mountains and the crisis in the Himalayas. So it's fantastic. And Kunda too has given opportunities. We've had students who worked with us, work for the Nepali Times. So building these kinds of skill sets and building these global networks, the give and take of not only in terms of scholarship, but of practice and of friendships, enduring friendships, building on the curiosity that these kinds of classes generate. There's curiosity and interest and critical thinking and learning how to connect the dots. I think these are thrilling aspects of the pedagogy that we're pursuing here.
Yeah, I think the idea that so many members, key members who produce so much of the foundation and the content for the Melting Mountains project are alumni is one of the most exciting aspects of the project for me, and the ability to bring in new students, some of who may take this course, some of who won't, is for me a new way of engaging in a kind of multi-generational class research project that grows over time as well as expands out into space, or geography, that is the space of the mountains and the world. But can we maybe we can come down to some brass tacks here for a moment. What are the course objectives for the students this winter? And when you think about, as you begin to plan to take them into different areas of Nepal, what do you want the students to take away most from the experience this J-term?
Well, I think it's most of all, it'll be the experience. And as Carol said, at an emotional level, to move them about what's happening. I mean, this is a crisis that has turned into a breakdown, a climate crisis that's become a climate breakdown. And even while I've been teaching this course at J-term, Carol, since 2018, I think, things have moved so fast. Things that we thought would happen in 10 years, 15 years time are happening now already. The heat waves, the record-breaking floods, so we knew it was coming, but it's now coming much faster than we thought. So it's actually been a challenge to not just fine-tune, but totally adapt the course and the curriculum to these changes. and to bring out the urgency of it and the immediacy of it. So once they go to Nepal, I think what they'll be seeing will be just proof of everything they've seen in the class and read about in the class in the readings, and to see it in front of their eyes. And out of it, they'll be doing some essay writing, they'll be doing multimedia products, they'll be doing podcasts. So they'll be trying to find how you communicate the urgency of this climate breakdown to a larger public. So they also get to know about how to communicate better. In fact, one of the failures of the climate crisis has been that we, mainstream journalists and others, have not been able to communicate properly how serious it is. We've been reporting on it as if it's business as usual, or as if it's just another environmental thing that's happening, that can be solved immediately. No, this is a global crisis, and it's accelerating, and that urgency needs to come out. And I think that's what the outcome is if these students come back to Abu Dhabi and then go on to further studies, because they're from all different branches with different majors. Some are taking writing courses, others are scientists, and they will take this to their fields and whatever they specialize in later on in life.
Yes, contextualization, I think, is really important, understanding where you are in place, and that this place is not in space. It's actually very close to us. This is the region, when you look at the map and you see how close and what defines this region, I think it's astonishing, because so many times we have such a Western, Eurocentric or American-centric perspective, given that we're in an American institution. But when you turn the map around, you really see the world in a very different way. And it's great to get out of this very constricted, I think, Western space to really see that there's a whole world out there facing these global challenges. On a more practical level, I think that students will have an opportunity to really know the scholarship, some of the important scholarship, because of course they can't learn everything, that pertains to this topic, be it geopolitics or science or history. So they'll be reading different kinds of material. And as Kunda said, communication is really important. They'll be able to communicate their understanding. They'll be able to have even I would say a more nuanced understanding of what is going on, because they'll be learning in so many different ways, not only because of the material, not only because we're on a regional trip, but because they'll be photographing, they'll be painting, they'll be presenting, they'll be interviewing experts. These is, although I hate the word skill set, it does create an important skill set that is useful to all students, all adults moving forward into life. Being able to really clearly explain what it is you're trying to communicate to the person that you're speaking with is key. And so we do believe, and I personally think, that this will be very meaningful for the students and for us as well, because we too have a disciplinary focus, and it puts us out of our comfort zone, doing things that we may not have tried to do before, even with the risk of not doing it so well. The important thing is to keep growing, to keep learning, to keep understanding, and to mostly register the complexity. I think that's really important.
I'd like to, I have one more question here I want to ask, which goes a little bit deeper into some of the topics that have just come up. And I want to maybe start by going back to Kunda, but then I'll invite Sophia and Carol too will, I think, have some thoughts about this. Kunda, you talked about more than once today, things changing before your eyes and things changing since you started teaching this course. So I'm a historian. The things I teach only change when we have a new perspective to study them, not because the events are unfolding in front of my eyes, and I have to keep up with them. And so I'm curious, how do you teach the dynamic nature of such a crisis? how do you make that world in transition phenomenon part of the pedagogy? What kinds of, do you change the sorts of assignments you give the students? Do you ask them to read things differently? I'm just wondering, you know, how having a crisis like this unfolding as the classroom itself changes the way you operate as an instructor. And I want to hear, you know, from Sophia and Carol, if you have some thoughts on this as well. I'd love to hear.
Yeah, I think the dynamics is the real challenge. You know, as I said before, to try to just completely change the course to bring out how quickly things are changing, that's really difficult. So a lot of readings, a lot of historical readings, for example, looking at how the climate crisis evolved, not just after the Industrial Revolution, but goes back to colonialism and extraction of natural resources, you know, from the 17th, 16th century onwards. So looking at that perspective, and then how that kind of mining of the resources hasn't really changed. It's just gone from something to fossil fuels, and how that has you know, built up the carbon in the atmosphere. And the other, because I'm not an academic, but a journalist, what we use is our communication tools like repetition photography and before and after pictures, because the climate crisis is really almost made for before and after photography. You know, what were things like 50 years ago in the Alps, and the same place, the picture taken again today, how much the glaciers has receded, how much the lake has expanded. But the thing is, we used to use, till 4 years ago in the J term, I used to use photographs from 50 years ago and today. In the course this year, I'll be using photographs from 5 years ago and today, because that's how fast things are changing.
This is a really good question.
That's a great example. What an example that is. Oh my gosh. I'm sorry, Sophia. I just had to make it.
No, I mean, you know, I'm really glad you asked this question, because it feels, it's hard in academia. We kind of have to freeze time in order to take a careful examination. We look back, we look at the problems, we look at previous scholarship, we embed the knowledge in previous knowledge. We need to be in these disciplinary, let's say, conversations by citing everybody else. What are they thinking? Where is this discipline going? So it's hard to, when something is as dynamic as the climate crisis, one would think that how can you do it without really compromising on that level, or how does it change the class? I do think that Kunda gave really good examples. From his perspective, I would say that contextualization is everything. This is, students need to understand to see how things fit from the past to the present. The thinking around them. How do we think of power relations? What are geopolitics today? What do they represent? What are these power realignments that are taking place today? Do we need more cooperation when everyone's on the brink of conflict again? I mean, there are theories around all of these things, and we have to understand, why have we been thinking about the problems in this particular way? Where is there room for change? So some of it, I think, we're going to build on existing theories and frames, which are really, really important. And then we're going to, so the students actually don't feel lost, that this is just a catastrophe that is current, that this has taken time and is just accelerating. Understanding the concept of time, understanding how we need to think about these problems moving forward. This idea of business as usual, how does it persist? For those studying policy, what does it mean to change the policy, the agenda, first of all, and also the policy mix? How should governments like Nepal's government be thinking about this problem? Not only in a silo for itself, but it also in cooperation, in communication at the very least, with all the countries in the region. So these are, I think, things that we can do that preserve the mission of understanding, the thinking that has been going on from different fields over years and years of careful study, but to also be able to see what's happening now so that we don't think that this is, a new phenomenon that everybody says, oh, what just happened? How can this be happening? Well, we're going to provide some explanations and some ways of thinking about why this is happening and how we can change.
That's exactly, let me just add to Sophia's. So we've gone beyond telling people or students or showing students how bad things are. We all know things are bad. It's in all the media, it's in social media, it's in front of our eyes. I think that's the other change in the curriculum that has been made, is to look for solutions. So what do we do now? We know what the problem is. What is the solution? And there we go beyond just communicating what's happening. We have to try to see also how awareness can lead to behavior change at the individual level, at the community level, at the national level, at the global level,
Yes.
and change immediately, because we just had 8 years to start rolling back on carbon. And so the urgency plus action solutions is where I think we're geared at.
I would add to that urgency, sort of a space to process the story, and action, in that this way of learning is it's messy. It's inherently messy. It's not neatly compartmentalized pieces of knowledge or data that they can work. They are hit hard by these direct experiences. They need spaces to process that. Feelings of helplessness, feelings of guilt, feelings of anger. You see this in not just these two courses, but for example, one J-term course will be interacting with the women in the garment industry in Bangladesh. So students need the opportunity to retell their own stories in relation to what they're experiencing, what they're feeling. The contextualization helps, the direction toward, here's how you can move this forward, even in small ways, even if you don't have a lot of time, even if you feel as if there's nothing the entire world can do, to give the students a sense of agency at a variety of levels. We often talk about creating global leaders and training our students to be global leaders, and they think they have to be president of this and that. They can lead in their own daily lives, in their own friendship circles, with their own families. In this type of learning too, and I think over the 4 years at NYU Abu Dhabi, one of my hopes is, in general, that students will become better, no matter what their major is. They'll become better story collectors, able to hear multiple perspectives, able to deal with that, able to make sense of that, able to understand multiple and competing contexts, and that they'll become better storytellers.
Yeah.
And able to do that with an ethical representation of the voices that have been shared with them. That's not easy. And they don't see themselves in that way necessarily, an engineering student, for example. So these courses, what Sophia and Kunda and Mark, what you have done in Shanghai, give the students a very special opportunity to take messiness and use it as fertilizer, use it as fertile ground for social change and self-change.
Well, our whole thinking has been to put everything with in little boxes with labels that are distinct. And I think this idea of messiness in academic speak is interdisciplinary thinking, which I do believe it's true. We need to I think all these labels, I'm now coming to this idea that, all of this categorization and labeling has ruined it for us, because in reality, nothing is in a silo. And the students get very distracted, not only the students, but us as well, like all of society, actually. We get very distracted because the spotlight, and I think the media contributes to this, spotlights different things at different times, and then they move on. So we're kind of moving our gaze from one place to another. The importance here is to keep our gaze focused, to really see what's going on beyond the brief time that, the daily life, the quick, the accelerated pace of living really affords us. And I do believe that this is a huge gift, to be able to stay for a while, to stay in place, to really go deeper. This is what we need in order to really understand what all of these things that are happening mean to our lives.
Yeah, Sophia, I just want to just add something to what all of you just said. Carol, you spoke about different concepts of what leadership is, which I think is crucial. The idea that we can lead in our everyday lives rather than leading on a big stage. In part because I think what happens to college students, and I know this happens to me, is that this is an age where we have transformative experiences. We really do have these transformative experiences that last for the rest of our lives. And the idea, as I think about it, that we have students who are going to be having these experiences, bringing such different backgrounds together into those experiences and learning to connect together about this region in ways that transform them together, is what I think really makes these kinds of opportunities something quite exceptional, because people aren't going to have an experience and go away by themselves. They're going to have these experiences with people, and these relationships are going to last forever. And it's these kinds of relationships that we really need if we are going to do, Sophia, what you're saying, is change the agenda. And Kunda, what you're saying is find solutions. So I want to thank you all three of you, for being here with me today. Every time we meet, I learn, no exception today. I wish I could take the classes. I may have to sneak into Nepal in order to attend the conference at least.
Please come.
Join us.
Okay, all right. Can I actually ask you, do you have anything you'd like to, we have students registered for the classes. Kunda, Sophia, do you have something to say to them before the term starts?
Well, I think it's an immersion course, so be prepared to be thrown in. And we won't throw you off the deep end, it'll be the shallow end. But yeah, I think it'll be a great experience, because aside from the climate crisis and everything else, you just get to see a totally new place. And take in the smells and the sounds and the sights of Nepal and the mountains.
Well, I would say be prepared to be challenged. I love swimming, so I do believe in jumping in the water and giving it your all. It will be an opportunity for students to sort of flex all their muscles and to go to places that are beyond their comfort zone. And as long as people are open, I think through our class majlis that we're organizing at the end of each evening, we will have a chance to debrief and unpack and share the different ways by which we've understood, we've experienced the day, some of the takeaways. All of my experiences in J terms have been absolutely amazing. I do think that the students, they have their first couple of weeks to really build a foundation of knowledge so that they have an informed understanding of where they're going, and then just delving into it is going to be truly exceptional. And thank you, Mark, for inviting us to share all these ideas.
Yeah.
I think that this modulus idea at the end of each day is wonderful, and it in fact anticipates. I wanted to ask this question also because it anticipates a little bit what we're going to do as a follow-up. We want to bring our students, Carol, onto the screen with us or by themselves to answer their own questions, to raise their own questions about what they learned there. And I think that actually having these sessions at the end of each day where they begin to process these things together may help lay the groundwork for a follow-up webinar. That's really something special. So thanks again to all of you, and
Thank you.
I look forward to seeing you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.